Hi, everybody, and welcome to this series of webinars organized by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in partnership with Economy Next. As you know, the last 18 months have been very difficult for all of us, and we've gone through most probably the most traumatic period in our lives, individually and also as a country. However, the silver linings are appearing. We can see the vaccination process, gathering momentum, and you can see a way out of this in terms of the health part of it. But however, in terms of the economic part of it, I think we have a lot more things that we need to do, and I think it's a very, very good time to start planning for this. And I think the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, in partnership with Economics, is really, wanted to empower our large and even SMEs, the business leaders, in terms of what sort of mindsets and thinking that we should develop in the coming months and weeks, so that we are ready for the post-COVID prosperity that hopefully our society and our country will benefit and will achieve. I'm truly delighted to have an eminent panel joining me today for this panel discussion, and I'm not going to give a huge good background on each of them, because once you mention their name, I think you're very well aware of who they are. Welcome everyone, and I'm going to get straight into it by asking him. I found this very interesting quote on your social media over the last few weeks, and I thought I'm going to start off with you. And I don't want to be misquoted, so I'm going to quote directly from it. Don't let your mind lock down, because that's where we really live. Very interesting quote. So how can business leaders not let their mind play tricks on them, and kind of unleash their minds, their thinking, to kind of take up the opportunities that will come up in a post-COVID world?
Firstly, I think what COVID has done more damage to the mind than the body of the business world, if you really think about it. And that's partly because, we were not prepared for crisis. But if you look at the trend of crisis over the last 2 centuries in the world, it's only accelerating. So we got to be prepared, and that mindset of being prepared for a crisis at any time is important. And I feel mindset-wise, it took a long time for the business community to adjust. We were waiting to come out of it, and we were hoping that there would be a quick solution. I don't think there's going to be a quick solution. There will be other variants of COVID. There will be other crises coming in. We just got to be prepared. As far as the world population is about 8 billion. If you look at the rate at which we are consuming, there is going to be the side effects of consumption. And COVID is no different. In many ways, it's a side effect of all the consumption we are making. So we got to be prepared. And I feel the way you can be prepared for that is for business leaders to spend more time thinking. Spend more time really understanding the entire science of thinking and how we think. And that I don't think is happening adequately. And to me, that's one way out of it, is for leadership to spend more time on thinking, understanding the science of thinking, and enabling the organization to spend more time on thinking, rather than getting into this activity treadmill and keep running, not having the time to step back and relook at it.
Thank you. Interesting thoughts to start off with. So I'm going to move to Kasturi next, because you run a very interesting conglomerate. Are you thinking? And how has your thinking led to the kind of innovation and the kind of agility that seems to be required in such volatile times?
Thanks, Imran. And I totally concur with what what Hilmy said. And I think from Sri Lanka point of view, we knew the importance of, we've always been in some crisis, but because we are protected in some form or shape in terms of policy, in terms of who in terms of access to the powers may be, and other than apparel and tea, which competes in a global setting and they have to be competitive. The rest of us are kind of, this is critical. You don't spend time thinking because it's okay, because you're anyway doing okay. So the thing is, I came in the middle of this whole pandemic, right? And I was thinking before coming into the role, and the pandemic was not there. And imagine my flight, I had to continue thinking, but it was different. But I guess getting the house in order, normal things are where you get the teams working in agile teams. That means you give the decision making to the lowest denominator. You make sure that you can be resilient. But most importantly, I guess which helped us is to keep our purpose in front. So this whole thing becoming a purpose-led group was started with during Stephen's time, but we didn't do much with it. And it helped us when you define who you are as a group. And our purpose is making healthful living happen. What do you mean by healthful is the families of Sri Lanka, we want to create products and services which are better for them. We want to reduce inequality, and we want to make sure that we have an inclusive world, and talk about the environment. So in that context, when we have that, it helped me to define my scope of thinking. So while we just took a couple of months to navigate and make sure the business was as usual, this leadership team, actually, we spent time to see where do we grow? Look, what are the opportunities we are missing? So during crisis, we actually looked at how can we become stronger. And that's the reason you saw that we would have innovated products, which I think the last innovation was about 8 or 10 years ago. And last year we did about 5 or 6 new products. And this year we have a whole new suite coming in. We took bold decisions there so that we could even look at competing. Even in Bangladesh, we took some new products in. So I guess that was the thing and I totally agree. You have to, while it's natural to get your hands dirty in what you're used to and naturally get into operational decision making, and because crisis means quick decisions, and trusting your teams, build your teams to take that and move, stepping back and seeing who you are, what is your vision, where do you want to land in a couple of years, where can your value unlocks come in. And interestingly, I told the team, I remember we said, look, remove all the constraints, just think big, see don't tell me you can't do this because of this, that. We say all that will come for second question, but think about it. And the amazing things which came through. So I guess it's important because we have to be able not to navigate this crisis. We have to be able, from a Sri Lankan point of view, to be able to compete in global settings and compete with global companies. And for that, you can't do by just doing incremental change.
Old economic theories of comparative advantage and all that sort of things, got thrown out because supply chains are in chaos, right? So, I like what you're talking about in terms of, we need to have a production economy. It may not work in all industries, but at least the mindset of making something, right? And that will lead to prosperity and self-sufficient, not just as a self-sufficient, but at least the kind of security that we need. How does a business leader develop a mindset of creating stuff?
Yeah, thank you, Imran. In fact, you're spot on. But before I answer that question, I just want to give you some backdrop as to what we are facing with and why I keep harping on this particular aspect of a production economy. And as you rightly said, the first point is the doctrine of comparative advantage, which we have been taught in school and also in our marketing textbooks. Now, that is an absolutely rubbish theory. And if you go and look at what the US has done, you'll find empirical evidence to say that it is rubbish, because I don't waste time, money, but you can definitely look it up and do your comparison and analysis. The sad thing in Sri Lanka is we don't do enough of reading and look at what history has done. So that is the first part. The second part is we are currently in a large business cycle movement, which we call the chondriative cycle. This chondriative cycle is a 60 to 70-year-old cycle. This cycle shifts predominantly based on some kind of production-based innovation. We have seen now, this is the sixth cycle that we're seeing. We have seen in the recent past, automobiles, petrochemicals, and part of the fourth cycle, which was in the 1930s, 1970s. Then we've seen the fifth cycle emerge in terms of information technology, communication, technology, etc. And now we are in a very crucial stage in the global economic setting. So that's your second biggest pillar that I think we have missed. And as Kasturi said, we need to think big, but I don't think we're thinking big. If you look at what we are doing, it's absolute garbage, right? Our corporate leaders are not ready. Our businesses are not ready. Our business models are not ready. We just cannot compete. We cannot compete globally. To compete globally, but for once, I think we have got a very aligned macroeconomic framework in place. Now, why I say that it's aligned, because if you want to compete globally, your cost structures need to be properly looked at. You can't compete otherwise. And for that, you need to have your fiscal policy in place, your monetary policy targeting towards the export and industrial policy, and also your export policy and industrial policy. If you don't have these four policies in place, we have never had it before. So for the first time, I mean, I am apolitical, but you get clubbed into a particular political type of framework, because when you take a particular economic stance, and this economic stance tends to mirror your own your own ideologies or your idiosyncrasies in whichever way you want to look at it. So so to come back, I mean, I'm really anxious for Sri Lanka now, because we have the policy framework in place. We have a restart where all global economies are now faced and are starting at the same base, because we all had a contraction. The entire economy was shut. There was no big advantage in terms of where we are in the positioning structure. So therefore, Sri Lanka has a good platform now to be part of the bigger business cycle that is unfolding. And this bigger business cycle is unfolding with technology, green technology, energy efficiencies, right? We are looking at artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, right? We sit on a huge resource base of minerals. We have done absolutely, I mean, sad to say, we have done absolutely nothing about it. If you look at the bank's asset allocation, it's all in consumer, right? And we keep talking about a production economy. So it's a laughing stock. I mean, there is no way, if you look at empirically, empirical evidence is very clear. No economy has developed without a production base, right? From US to Germany to Japan to Taiwan to Korea to Malaysia, even to Singapore, and now China, right? I mean, so it's very evident, and somehow we have been distracted, and we keep we keep fighting for the smaller pie. Why? Because we feel that economies of scale are only in Sri Lanka. No, economies of scale are not Sri Lanka. Economies of scale is beyond Sri Lanka. You can set up your companies and cater to the global market, right? You can cater to the region. That's where the economy scales are. So all are trying to come into Sri Lanka, set up manufacturing for Sri Lankan market, which is a 22 million population market. And we say, oh, we don't have economies of scale. Now, how did Netherlands become the largest fruits and vegetable exporter next to the US? They don't have half the land size that we have. They have a 15 million population, right? So it is absolutely essential for Sri Lanka to pull their minds out of wherever they are keeping it, right? Because as Hilmy said, it's a mindset issue. And I think we are really in dire straits if we don't address it now.
The question I have for you, Chanakya, is how do we kind of change the mindset to embrace professionalism, also to embrace ambition?
Yeah, so Imran, thanks. The inconvenient truth is that if you look at Sri Lanka, all the firms that have developed very professional practices, whether it's product, service, employee value proposition, whatever, have three factors in common. Either they are forced to compete in an overseas market with developed world competitors. They have tier one clients, tier one global clients who impose the global best practices on them, or they operate domestically with tier one competition created by multinational corporations and best in the world. It's basically those three factors. Some, like for us, as you remember, we started with just 10 people 18 years back, and we grew to work with the best international banks, asset management firms, acquired by a Fortune 500 company, and now one of the world's largest private equity firms. We were forced because we had all three of those factors. We had to operate in overseas markets, tier one clientele, and our competition was also world class. But we are not the only one. If you look at our apparel industry, because of their joint venture partners, they got the same thing. If you look at our IT technology offshore export companies like Virtusa or London Stock Exchange Group, they got that from the same side of things. So the question is that why should a small and a medium enterprise now starting or a pure local business should aspire to basically have these global professionalism? Why should they aspire, or why can't they do what they're doing? In my opinion, they should do that to basically break the negative cycle, right? Because if you don't have world-class professionalism in your product, service, or in your even in your employee value proposition, you end up always with tier 2 clients who can never pay you enough to have the world-class standards. And that becomes a never-ending negative cycle. You can't hire the best quality people. You can't retain the best quality people. You don't have enough resources, or your financiers or investors don't trust you to give you the money to come up with that. So you need to break that cycle. And there are enough examples, even during the past 40 years in Sri Lanka. Despite all the negatives we talk about in Sri Lanka, having gone through wars, not one war, 2 wars, one with JVP and the LTT, we still have companies that secured world-class joint venture partnerships, got NASDAQ listed. How did that happen? So I think that is basically out there. And the last point is that one of the greatest starting points is not being shy, not being stingy to hire world-class talent. Look at our own Colombo's restaurant industry. You know, the places that are run by people who have had experience running best of class facilities in global cities. Look at their facilities, the type of experience, the type of market share they have secured. So that's my point.
Interesting. Kasturi, I'm going to bring you in with competition elevating you, or whether you can elevate yourself if you really want to, but I think competition might do that a lot more to you. Yes.
So both happens, I must say. If you take off where you have MNCs present here locally, you have 2 ways you can do it. You can take them on and try to compete each time, react each time they come forward with something, and that is really not elevating us. That's kind of just defending, in my opinion, versus thinking globally what if you're a truly Sri Lankan company, my argument is, the Sri Lankan consumer better. They can claim to be knowing, but your roots are here, right? And if we can innovate, so that's where our Komarika, even last year we brought Klogad salt, and amazingly it was took off because we understood salt culturally, how it could, and it can be a product which can work. So in same of Bangladesh, in our Kumaric oil, there's a variant which is very relevant to the Bangladeshi community. So we've learned that in sometimes while we understand, we will compete differently, like uniquely where we have a natural right to compete. We premiumize where we can, and most of the spaces, like for baby Sharami, we are large, we can be bold enough to say culturally our purpose. We were bold enough saying the mother and baby moment is gone. We want diversity, right? So we want women to come into work, and one big part of it is how do you get co-parenting in a nucleus of a family, which allows a woman, a father, to be part of the child's well-being. Hence, the woman also can, without apologizing, can follow her dreams if she wants a career. So our brand took over that. So these are ways we boldly say as a Sri Lankan, we can do it. But I think the other side, on Kenneth's side, and I think of what Chanakya said, is how do you compete globally? So now say if I take a pharma industry, and I believe a production economy is important, but it is not only to serve our 20 million. We started with a pharma thing and industry, and we were in pharma manufacturing, we were in imports, and we had the best. We used that MNC exposure to get the best into Sri Lanka. So while you could see in the papers, there was a whole move towards stop imports, limit imports of pharmaceuticals. When you are not a science-driven country, you have to get the best of science coming here, make us production-driven, yes, give high-quality, affordable medicines to the local community, but can't we use it to export? That has to be the mindset. So for that, what do you lack? I think we lack the science, like Apparel brought in tech partners in to learn. What we have is we have amazing lot of people who learn fast and do it better sometimes. So you need to give yourself a runway to learn. So for example, at a Morrison, while we supply and to the government, our strategy already onboard some 2 big Indian giants who are using this plant to manufacture their brand. And we tapped into supply chain of theirs. So technically, when you're producing for 20 million, I can't get the best API for that small volume. I'll be paying premium. But when you go with the partner and say, okay, I will do this, you give me your supply chain raw material at your price. I'm only a delivery location. You give me the science. So that's a short-term window to get the science, understand. And you become a production economy in the short term, maybe through contract manufacturing. In the long term, you become a science-driven. The people get knowledgeable, you get skilled. And apparel today, they are leading the world in innovation in apparel. But it took a long way. So I guess that's what I'm saying is we should, so we gravitate towards protectionism. When that happens, when there is, I was saying manufacturing and production driven economy, we shouldn't be protecting locals through policy, because then no MNC is going to come and help us to become fast. You accelerate your growth, not only domestically, but you become regionally relevant. Just being domestically self-sufficient is not going to allow us, we are not going to be cost competitive if you can't tap into global supply chain with an advantage. And get the new sciences in if it's a new industry, if it's electronics or whichever. I guess, and we should not shy away from saying, I want to be the best out there and go out and learn. What we don't do is go out and learn. We think, okay, I'll just do this. Somebody can protect me. I'll do this and give it at any quality. That way we are here, and globally, look at Thailand, Vietnam, they've moved from the rice agri-driven to technology. I mean, that's because they invested in learning it. So I guess it's a shift, and I think there has to be a lot of policy strengthening, and politics should stay out of it. And you can't, just because you know somebody, you get this contract, and if a person gets a contract, it's good, but they should be having the mindset to be best in class to bring it. So I guess I learned this the hard way with pharma, and we took a bold decision. If you don't want government, let the others compete in that space. We compete in global space. For that, we had the access to partners, and we did it. And I'm glad we got two, three big brands who have already signed up and said, you know what, we have used for Sri Lanka, because its capacities on our plants are expanding, are not expanding, but demand is more. And we can use your plan to do it. So it's a mindset change. And I must say, it starts with us as leaders. We can't blame policymakers. And sometimes a policy won't be conducive. If you're bold enough to take it, you can make it work. So.
Thank you. Very interesting thoughts from a very practical, hands-on perspective. I'm going to come back to you, Kenneth. Production economy is not protectionism, right? And I think that's what I've tried to understand. I think a lot of people get this. I think a lot of, particularly small and medium leaders, they just want protectionism, but they don't really understand that someday competition will come, and consumers are very discerning. And the next question I have for you, before I come to Hilmy, I'll come to you first. The consumer is very discerning, and even if it's a protected thing, they will not necessarily buy low quality products or things that are not competitive cost wise. So how does the business leader realize that maybe protection isn't a short term thing, because we obviously have foreign exchange challenges, but in the long term, they're not going to get protected by protection, and it's just production economy is also about competing internationally. How do you change that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, again, what we have been what we have inherited is this level of protectionism at a SME level. Now, if you look at, most of the larger middle sort of a larger balance sheet type of companies who are also categorized in the SME space, you will find that these guys are still apprehensive of the journey, because policy inconsistency has made their life difficult. I mean, Kasturi probably would realize it if there was no policy in place to change the pharmaceutical industry to ensure that out of the $500 million we spend on an annual basis, if you don't want to retain that here, if there was no policy, then I think Kasturi Demas would have been hard pressed. Now the policy framework sets the tone for business leaders to go out and venture either through contract manufacturing or through JVs. We are seeing the apparel industry do the same thing, right? And they have become globally relevant. Now, some of these SMEs don't have that opportunity, even though they have a lot of products that are of international appeal. I don't know whether the quality, but their supply side has not been well looked at. Their manufacturing process are not of international standard. Their quality is an issue, and their management structures, their business model per se is an issue. I mean, a classic example is what Brandex did. Brandex divorced the shareholdership from management. Now, that's a decision that many of our family-driven SMEs can't make. So therefore, they rely on protectionism. Now, if you move away from that, then I think we have graduated to a fairly different plateau where we can compete and where we can attract new capital, new technological transfers, new HR best practices on board. But this is in the private sector. So that's where this dichotomy Sri Lanka faces. Firstly, the lack of understanding in the overall comparative advantage. Secondly, the lack of understanding of protectionism. It's not protectionism, it's a policy framework to shift production into Sri Lanka. Every country did this. We have to look at how best we can rationalize some of our export earnings, because we want to plow them back into the infrastructure required. We want to plow them back into the national balance sheet to expand the balance sheet. Because I asked this question from investment banking company. I asked them, what do you think is Sri Lanka's balance sheet size? I have not got an answer, right? Because we talk about corporate balance sheet, but I said, what do you think is a national balance sheet size? Probably Chanakya can answer this. Right? Look at what is the earnings multiplier of the Sri Lankan balance sheet. Have you ever done that? I mean, I would put a ballpark figure of about $500 billion. Right? I mean, back of the envelope. Because why? Our ocean resources are untapped. Our minerals are untapped. Even if you take graphite alone, the graphite industry, graphite revenues are significant for Sri Lanka. Right? So there is plenty of that's out there. So the shift is essential, and I hope that some of these business leaders listening could move, because we don't have time, right? So it's a first move advantage. We are already late, right? We are already talking too much, right? And doing too many webinars. We can have production.
Very interesting perspective, Kenneth. Thank you. Hilmy, I'm going to come to you for two things. One is you've helped a lot of family businesses make that transition into becoming managed professionally. I'm sure you are aware of the kind of thinking patterns and how we can change that. So first question is, how do we do that? And second one, very quickly also, is about the consumer himself, him or herself, right? The consumer is very, very, advanced in terms of their information sources. They're aware of what's going on. They have choices at their fingertips. How do you cater to a consumer like this? Because I don't think in history we've ever had such an empowered consumer. How do we, kind of cater to that as well?
Okay. Going to the first question and picking up from what the other speakers have said, one clear thing that we see, because we have done assignments in about 40 plus countries, is now this could be challenged, but corporate Sri Lanka, the comfort factors are very high. There is neither the hunger to grow significantly higher, nor the burning desire to go out and do it. Yeah. The only exception I see is the apparel industry, right? And this started only 30 years ago, at a time when nobody wanted to even work at a junior level for an apparel company. Today, they are one of the most sought after employers. Compare that with what our tea industry has done after what I've stopped counting, 150, 160, 170 years. Still $1.4 billion. We keep talking of vision, mission, everything. We think tea bags is the next thing after sliced bread, the greatest innovation we have had. So overall, I feel the comfort factor is very high. And only a few, like in the apparel, the MASs, the Brandix, and some of the service examples that Chanakya gave, have actually gone out and done stuff internationally and competed. For the others, still the comfort factor is very high. And this is epitomized in the tea industry very well, right? And it's very clear if you look at the tea industry. It's all run by family businesses. They can't attract talent from outside, right? And what innovation have they done? Apparel created everything from scratch. There was nothing Sri Lanka had. Tea was God's gift. And, Sir Thomas Lipton decided to plant. If not for those two, what has tea done in terms of innovation? What has tea done in terms of value addition? Right? I think we barely have one company which is $100 million company. And we talk so big about our tea. We barely have 100 million, just a single $100 million company. And 100 million today is nothing. I mean, we have clients like, we've done work with clients like Lalan, which is a low key, who would be doing about 2 or 3 times that. Very low key, but has operations in 7 to 8 countries, lots of value addition. So I feel, we are very comfortable. So the push is not there. So that is what we need to see. Can we bring, like what happened to apparel, can we bring those future MSs, brandics into the ecosystem, right? And that's what we need to really drive into the ecosystem. Yeah.
And the question about the consumer, how is the consumer changing, and how is the consumer likely to change post COVID? From a global perspective, I think that an insight into that might be really helpful for our business leaders.
Sure. See, in terms of, if you just look at, the equity appreciation in biotechnology, AI, all of those, some of those funds are growing at like 30-40% in the last year. So that's a clear indication that, those are growing sectors. So as Sri Lanka, what we need to also be looking at is how can we tag into that global value chain? How can we tag into that global value chain? So in terms of responding to the consumer, yes, I mean, those changes are taking place. And I think our focus has to be really on creating consumer value. I think one of the pitfalls I see with a lot of our tech startups is that it's technology, looking for a problem. So whereas you need, the other way around, problem looking for technology. So what you need is to focus on what does the consumer need? How do I improve the consumer's lifestyle? And then work backwards. What do I need to do? Technology is only an enabler. Technology is just an enabler, like what happened with electricity, with roads, with transportation. It had a sea change, and we are going through that digital transformation now. There'll be something else after that. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Chanakya. Now, Acuity is part of a really important global supply chain as well, right? And they have been from day one. Your clients have almost all been exclusively international from day one. Remember when it was Colamba and it started in the early 2000s with a handful of people as the initial analysts, and I'm sure you're part of the original team as well. So I don't necessarily think you need a huge amount of capital, but you need a huge amount of belief that you need to be part of something bigger, right? How do you create those relationships? How do you maintain those relationships? More importantly, how do you grow them in the post-pandemic era?
Yeah, so I think, Imran, just like the apparel industry had their joint venture partners, our biggest strength was, even though we started with 10 people, our 4 founders were former managing directors of investment research from 4 bulge bracket global investment banks. So that was basically the technology transfer. That was basically the access to the market. And that can be seen in so many other successful industries as apparel or into value-added rubber, anything. So I think that foundation, we got it quite right. So right now, where we are in terms of where our talent sourcing, where our training and development and client acquisition, as you said, we are actually a pandemic boom industry, because the pandemics are I hope I'm not coming across in the wrong way in saying this, but the fact is that everyone, all our clients in New York or in Europe or in London that previously was somewhat hesitant to have analysts working outside their own office are now working remotely. So that kind of helped us in a big way. But the challenge now is that how would this forced remote working help us to maintain our culture, talent retention, etc. Right? Mental health is a real challenge, right? Especially in the services industry, because yes, our industry is ideally suited for working from home. In fact, 99% of our people are working from home, but it is a situation where you have to also maintain the motivation levels and the lack of human contact and things like that. To be honest, we don't have answers. We are working with global HR consultants to advise us on how do we make remote working much more bearable, much more enjoyable for people, and how do we bring that one. Again, how do we basically bring the mentorship? Every year, even in a smaller location like in Colombo, we hire 70, 80 young university graduates from University of Colombo, Moratuwa, Jayawardhanapura. How do we provide the same quality of mentorship and the intensity we used to provide through our senior managers? So these are the problems that we are seeking answers for. I think we are getting there. First thing to understand is that there are a problem and putting your resources. So I think we are at that particular stage.
Very good. This question is actually for the panel, and it flows from something that Chanakya said. Anyone can, have a go at this. The move to remote work and some of it which will be, permanent, some will be semi-permanent, has actually allowed, the tapping of global talent pools, but also segments in societies, women, people differently able, who are not being able to be tapped in before, right? One good example is, everybody in the IT BPM industry comes to me and says, we don't have enough talent here. So I said, that is a very remote, virtual industry, right? We have developers of Sri Lanka, not to forget any other countries, working in different markets in the world, and they are now a little bit more freer to kind of contribute to their country's economic growth. And I think the mindset change to embrace everybody, that this remote working has provided. I don't see it still, really being tapped into. What can we do to, to really tap into it? Anyone can go for it. Yes.
Let me try that, because it actually is something we looked at as an opportunity to, it was anchored around inclusivity and talent. So what we felt was there was a whole lot of talent who were giving up purely because the physical work, 7 hours a day, was tough, and especially females. And of course, there are the special need people as well. But the more importantly is when you look at people who have ailing parents or other obligations, and kids especially. So we've kind of said, for example, is remote working works, especially from the more corporate, white-collared back office where you can work and you don't have to physically come to a corporate setting. But it means a mindset change as a management, that you're okay not knowing what your employee does. That's the biggest problem. So you see when you say lockdown, unlock, it's no lockdown, is like, you physically come in. So my question is, who has to come in? You come in, but I'm mindful, like Chanakya said, there is we're human beings. We thrive on interaction and relationships, and this digital format doesn't allow you to have that. So how do you find that balance? And then you have enough benefit. A, real estate can be used more efficiently. B, we realize that people don't have to leave, talent doesn't have to leave the workforce. I'm not a fan of mediocrity. I would encourage mediocrity to leave the workforce. It's very tough with the current the laws we have, but talent, I'll go out of my way to keep them in the workforce. And from a culture and philosophy point of view, we say, we trust that the person we measure outcomes versus the clock in, clock out. We measure the outcome versus physically seeing the person. But how do we keep their motivation going as well? Because they have different problems, right? You can't switch to that totally, because sometimes I realized after a long time, we met one of the employees at something, and she said, thank God you had this. I said, why? I had an excuse to dress up and come to work, because I had got used to only getting up, cooking for the kids, getting into meetings, not looking after myself. I don't think I put makeup at all. Kasturi at least allow us to come once a week and dress up and feel good. And I told Aisha, remember, they have problems. So you need to find that mix. But from a business point of view, I think it's a good avenue for inclusivity, good avenue to actually get good talent to retain in a long term. And I guess it will work. And productivity is much better in the asset form as well as people. I mean, I don't travel too much. I kind of finish my workout and half an hour later I've logged into a meeting. And otherwise, if it's physically, I have to finish my workout and spend 1 hour before I kind of dress up and come to work on the road. So, yeah.
I think this working from home is something that has gained more prominence recently because of COVID. But the problem is far more deep-rooted than that. Far more. Because we are still running offices the way we ran production enterprises in an industrial revolution era. There is absolutely no reason in any case, I have written about this even pre-COVID, half the traffic on the road should not be there. There's absolutely no reason. And some of our biggest tech companies insist on coming and putting your thumb there and saying, I'm here at work. And, look at the annual reports. It's all about tech, AI, virtual reality, everything. But you insist on people coming. So we've been running this in a very archaic way. So it's not only where you work from. People must have the flexibility. Not saying today you come to office, or no, you stay at home. People must have the flexibility. Now, in consulting, that's something we've been doing for the last 20, 25 years. I mean, we've had at MTI right through flexibility for people to work where they want. But the bigger problem is, I think, as Kasturi also mentioned, there is a huge talent pool out there. Females in particular, we are not tapping in because, again, we have this mindset. You have to be employee, which means you need a letter of appointment. Which means there is a sacred time from 8:30 to 5:30. Your body has to be there. I don't care where your mind is, but your body has to be there, right? So those have to be broken. And I mean, to me, one of the most inspirational organizational structures is that of the movie industry. It's an old structure. If you want to, if movies were produced by today's corporate organizations, you'll be watching crap, right? You bring the best of talent together. It doesn't matter. How does payroll matter in any case? I mean, does payroll give you loyalty? Payroll is nothing. It's an illusion we have in our mind. We need to break those. I mean, recently we had a client asking us if people work from home, how do you know they are working? My question is, how do you know they are working in the office? So if you don't have productivity measurement, and the biggest irony today is the higher you get paid in an organization, the less you are measured on productivity. The white collar worker, my God, if a hand is taken off an apparel machine, there'll be 5 reports, right? But the higher you get paid, you don't get measured. So there has to be greater focus on productivity, and you have to work on a culture of trust. I mean, you can have all the technology, but there is no replacement for trust. And trust is not a plug-in solution. You have to build it into the culture, and that is where leadership comes into the role. Yeah.
Chanakya, very quick one, and I want Kenneth to also talk about how government is, moving towards, harnessing the full potential of because governments are the epitome of getting bums on seats, right? With very strict timelines and we're coming in. But Chanakya, how do you create this trust? The culture of trust that makes remote working work and also full utilization of the workforce.
Sure, Imran. I mean, I'll be very quick. Of course, we are blessed to be in an industry where there is a natural productivity measurement because we work directly to clients in a consultancy model. I mean, not different to, legal consultancy services or any other professional consulting service industry. So in that way, we are blessed because our industry structure is natural measurement of efficiency. We operate on a FTE basis, on a dedicated basis for a particular client. But the point is that this is very important, and this is a debate going all around the world, actually. You could see that even in New York now, firms are sometimes getting bad publicity because they are forcing people to come to work from 1st July and etc. So in fact, this debate is so important. Last issue of Harvard Business Review was titled Getting the Hybrid Right. So I really encourage all Sri Lankan business leaders to actually get that copy at least and read it. So it actually addresses all the matters of getting the productivity concerns sorted out and what is the ideal model, the softer issues including mental health and human interaction and everything. So, I mean, that's where we are. I mean, we are an industry that is committed to hybrid going forward. And we are lucky because our customers are also committed to that.
Kenneth, how is government looking at fully utilizing the talent pool out there?
Well, I mean, to pick up from some of the points that Hilmy pointed out. I think Sri Lanka has been far too laid back, and that's resonated by everyone in this particular forum. Now, Sri Lanka has tried to get PayPal, right, as part of supporting the ecosystem of startups from 2009. Now, this is unbelievable, right, to get PayPal. I mean, I can't believe what has happened has happened. We are still trying, right? And when I looked it up, I mean, I was told that there are certain things that need to be done, but there is no real focus. So the first thing that I did when I took over here was to see that how we can either get PayPal or have a similar payment mechanism, because there are plenty of payment mechanisms out there as opposed to PayPal. Whether we can work with even JCB, where JCB being a Japanese company has enough of bandwidth in the world to support this type of activity. So that's your first thing, the backbone and the infrastructure to support young entrepreneurs to stay at home, to contribute to the digital economy, which we keep talking about, is non-existent at the moment. There are people who are doing it in various forms, but to get the scale of it, because we are talking about a $5 billion earnings capacity of the IT industry alone, and that's by 2022. Now, to do that, you need to have an enabling factor. The enabling factor is what we're trying to look at from a legislation point of view. And the first thing that was done was to make IT industry tax-free. I mean, it has been tax-free, but we restated that it's going to be tax-free. So that is first thing. So that's an incentive to everyone to get on board and to change your business model.
So, before I conclude, I want to give each of you maybe 30 seconds, to kind of tell our business leaders in both, SMEs as well as large corporates, what do one thing that they need to focus on, in the coming months to kind of seize the opportunities that are coming in the post-COVID world. Can I start with you, Chanakya?
Just one thing, hire the best quality talent that you can.
Taking off from where I started on spending more time on thinking, once that is done, just get down to action. And as Richard Branson says in his book, screw it, let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Kasturi?
I think there's a pattern happening here. So I think want more for our country, think beyond the country, learn from, don't be ashamed just because you're big, don't think you're the best what's there in the world. Learn from the best and bring it, and let's be excellent to fight in a global sphere. So I think it's taking time to think, but learn from outside, bring outside in here. We're not, it will make us more competitive, but I think it will accelerate our growth in different forms and shapes.
I am still very optimistic, and I see great things for Sri Lanka, and I like to profess this global Sri Lankan type of mentality, and that's something I like to see evolve in the next 6 to 8 months. So that is a prerequisite for us, in terms of what we're trying to do, to be fearless, to compete, to embrace new business models, to plan well, and to look at the big picture of the horizon. I like to leave you with one quote, and that is from Sir Arthur C. Clarke. He said, the only way to discover the limits of possibility is to go beyond the impossible. Right? I think that is something that we have to look at. And I hope Sri Lanka will pick up from that. You can trade from home. I was in China before COVID, and that was in 2019. And I went to Shenzhen, and I went to a small village in Shenzhen. And there they were selling bees honey online. And this was a cottage industry, right? Promoted and supported by the local authorities. Now, that type of model needs to come into Sri Lanka. And I hope that the people who are in certain areas in the ICT section really looks at it, because we have various others. If you look at our infrastructure in terms of access to mobile POSs, we have about 30,000 mobile POSs. The total number of POSs, we have about 83,000. The mobile POSs for a merchant to use mobile POSs, we have only 30,000. That's not sufficient enough. Then so balance is only terminal based, which is so we have issues like that. So business opportunities are there for people who are in the tech startup place to come on board. Right? We have 23 million debit cards. unutilized. We still don't have a mechanism where we can have a digital wallet in place. So hopefully the digital wallet will be launched through LankaPay JCB, and that most probably will be in August. But things like this needs to be there. And that initiative only helps create that enabling environment and bring about trust. We spoke about trust. I mean, technically LankaPay, which is part of the central bank, owned by central bank and the two state banks, 46% of it is owned by the three entities I just mentioned, needs to be a driver in this environment. And that's something that we are trying to establish here now, and to become a leader than opposed to be a lagging type of institution. And we have the necessary talent pools to do this. Unfortunately, we need to unleash them. And that's where I want to leave it with Kasturi, saying that we have the talent, but we have not really looked at how to enhance and unleash them. And I hope that this would transpire in the near future before the year ends.